Your world is changing faster than you think. Our world's history is evaporating. And no matter what you want, we are entering a new era.
The Tasmanian tiger could come back from extinction.
The Tasmanian tiger could be brought to life.
This is the true story you need to hear.
He just did what lots of young men would have done in that circumstance all over the world, not just Tasmania. It's almost impossible mathematically that would have been the last Thylacine.
Here's this dead Bennett wallaby, still warm, laying on that game track with its head crushed. There's no Tasmanian devil could do that. There was only one thing, it was the Thylacine, because they could open their jaw about 90 degrees.
All across the world, animals are becoming extinct every single day. But this is the same old story, the story we've been told for years. And it all sounds quite familiar.
The Tasmanian tiger, easily distinguished by his straight, unjointed tail, being forced out of its natural habitat by the march of civilization. This is the only one in captivity in the world.
It reminds me of the old tale you have probably heard. The story of the Thylacine, aka the Tasmanian Tiger. Because in only 1986, all the way in the Pacific Ocean on the island of Tasmania, the Tasmanian government eventually declared it was officially extinct. But what if I told you scientists now believe they can clone the Thylacine, along with the most famous extinct animals in the world, using their DNA? What if I told you they are bringing them back from the dead? The reason why I'm asking you these questions is because it's very real. They are cloning these animals. But I'm here to show you something even more important. Because some people believe there is no point in cloning the Thylacine. They believe it is still alive today, with sightings of it reported every year for months on end. The following story is a whirlpool of secrets. It was also a world of suspense and sadness. Just recently, I was trying to see if I could find an area where the Thylacine, or as most people know it, the iconic Tasmanian tiger, could be hiding today. And the reason why I decided to do that was because I've always been intrigued about its story. The Thylacine was, or is, if it's still out there, a carnivorous marsupial. And on May 6th, 1930, this man shot and killed what is known as the last wild Tasmanian tiger, and his name was Wilfred Batty. I have been constantly researching this story because I've been wondering, why would Wilfred do such a thing? Who was he? Where did he live? Where is the gun that he once used? And does he have any family that are still living today? That's what I'm trying to find out. As I began further investigating this mystery, I came across a problem. At first, I didn't realize how large this mystery truly was, and eventually I thought I would never hear the full story, because wherever I looked, many of the people who had previously met Wilfred Batty had already died, and also no one seemed to have much information until one day this year in 2022. How did you become interested in researching and finding the Thylacine?
Well, in about 2002, myself and my girlfriend started to read about the Thylacine. We've always been interested in different stories about animals and folklore, and I started getting online and reading different books.
Today I'm talking with a man who has been researching and looking for the Thylacine for over 17 years. I decided to get in contact to see what he could tell me, and now we're having a video meeting. In what parts of the world was the Thylacine most prominent?
Well, most prominent was on the Australian mainland.
Yeah.
As previously, we believe it came from New Guinea across the land bridge. We're not quite sure why, but due to habitat expansion by humans, changes in climate, changes in prey, blah, blah, blah. It seems to have been pushed off the mainland several thousand years ago and across the land bridge to Tasmania, and then Tasmania was the last place.
Before I talked with Michael Williams, I had previously heard that the last wild thylacine was shot somewhere in a small rural community called Morbana by none other than Wilfred Batty. But Michael told me he strongly believed he knew where in Morbana it was shot. And naturally, I was very surprised when I heard this. So I decided to go and visit the location for myself. Through my research, I hadn't yet found the exact location in Morbana where Michael Williams said Wilfred shot the thylacine. So today, I'm paying a quick visit to Tasmania's capital city, Hobart, where the supposedly last Tasmanian tiger died in captivity. On this journey, I'm travelling over 300 kilometres to Hobart's Beaumaris Zoo. It was opened in 1895 by Mary Grant Roberts. Mary was a zoologist who published articles about her work on breeding Tasmanian tigers. She was also the first person in history to breed them. The final thylacine at Beaumaris, Benjamin was his name, was supposedly the last one in the world to die. Soon, you'll be seeing me step foot on that same significantly historic location. But for the moment, I have arrived in the town of Richmond to speak with someone very important.
In 1982, we had a wildlife guy, one of my colleagues, said he saw a thylacine at quite close quarters. And his name was Hans Narding. It was a very well known, very well publicised report, and I was asked could I go up and spend some time trying to confirm that. So I spent a lot of time up around the area. He said he saw this thylacine, but to do that properly I had to learn an awful lot about footprints and calls of animals and what animals might do, and I talked to an awful lot of people who had seen thylacines, who had actually caught thylacines. It was very exciting. I've been a wildlife biologist, that's like a professional wildlife biologist for over 40 years now, but I started off about your age with a great interest in wildlife, in understanding a group of carnivores like that. You've kind of got to understand where they live and what they live amongst. Immediately you have to think about, in Tasmania, Tasmanian devils and the thylacine in the past. So I'm always sort of thinking about how the ecology was arranged before white people came here.
In 1930, Wilfred Batty shot the supposed last wild thylacine. What procedures did the government go through to verify that information?
Oh, no, none. He just shot a thylacine like lots of people before him had, and no one then would have even thought it's the last one. It just happens to be the last one that was caught or shot. People were beastly careless about the animal. The only people that were really interested were people who wanted to catch one and sell it to a zoo or something like that.
Do you think that Wilfred Batty was unfairly labelled with association to causing the thylacine's extinction?
Oh, I think completely unfairly. He just did what lots of young men would have done in that circumstance all over the world, not just Tasmania. And in fact, it's almost impossible mathematically that would have been the last thylacine. For one thing, it was a juvenile, so it's only probably about a year old, so it's highly likely its parents were alive. And I think it's the height of, human hubris to think we could have caught or shot the last one simply in a chook pen. I mean, it's just a human fantasy to think that.
More than 80 years have passed since the last Tasmanian tiger died in captivity, but that hasn't stopped a steady stream of reported sightings.
Later in my interview with biologist Nick Mooney, he said he believed in the 1930s there were thylacines all around Tasmania slowly dying out. But for some reason, to this day, we continue to label Wilfred Batty as one of the leading causes to the Tasmanian tiger's demise. This mystery needed to be investigated much further. Okay, I have just arrived at Tasmania's capital city, Hobart, because I'm here to show you something absolutely incredible. This is the real location of where the last Tasmanian tiger died in captivity. Welcome to the Beaumaris Zoo. Inside the zoo was a lion enclosure, monkeys, elephants, zebras, and just over there in that old dome that's made out of concrete was where the polar bears were kept. But what I'm really looking for was where the thylacine lived. Just up there on the top level of the Beaumaris Zoo was where the native Tasmanian animals were kept. And that was the exact location of where the thylacine spent its last days in captivity. Today there are a few existing structures still here, and one of which is the leopard's pen. Now this little building right here, that was the old zookeeper's cottage, and where it's standing right now is just above the zoo itself. That was where the Reed family lived. Now, Mr. Reed, or Arthur Reed, was a zookeeper who lived here with his daughter, Alison Reed. Alison was known for taking her pet leopard for walks on the domain. The Beaumaris Zoo officially closed in 1937, but the story doesn't end there, because eventually it was taken over again, but this time not by humans. Like everything in this world, dreams fade and things become distant memories. The structures at Beaumaris eroded and the buildings became overgrown, and eventually all that was left was earth. Lately, have you tried searching for the thylacine yourself?
No, I haven't tried out there searching for many years. I mean, I go to lots of places doing wildlife surveys and all sorts of things, and of course I keep an eye out, but that's easy because I'm looking for other things. I'm using cameras for other things, surveying devils or quolls or whatever. There were all sorts of searches done through the late 70s, early 80s, and some of the best searches were done then, and they were done by using methods that had caught thylacines before, like snaring and stuff like that. In fact, there were searches almost continually every few years. There'd be a search right from the 60s and the 70s and 80s. So it was investigated pretty well. And we put a lot of time in, myself and colleagues put a lot of time in through the 80s trying to find evidence of thylacine. So there's a convention that 50 years after the last evidence, irrefutable evidence, you can regard something as extinct.
It's interesting to note that there have been many thylacine sightings since it was declared extinct. Have you heard of any thylacine encounters recently that have made you truly question if it is still out there today?
Decades ago, we were an agency that collected those reports, so it was like a central point. So all the reports sort of came to us. Now, only a few come to the authorities, and I include myself there because I still collaborate with the authorities on it. But most of them just turn up on social media. So to see what was going on, I'd have to spend my whole life on Facebook, and I'm not interested in doing that. When there's photographs of footprints or bits of video from trail cameras, stuff like that, then that's something I can have a look at. It's been a long time since someone's reported to me something very recent that happened to them, so something first-hand. So if that happens, I can go out and look at the place, see if I can find any footprints, maybe set some cameras up, stuff like that, or and reconstruct the sighting, because you want to have an idea of how good that person's judgment was of distance, time, very important things like that.
If I tried looking for a thylacine, where would you suggest I might look?
I don't think there's any pockets of really good habitat that aren't occupied by people. This is answering your question in a logical way. Thylacines like to live on good soils, where good productivity. That was the clash immediately. They wanted to live where white people wanted to live, good grassy woodland, open forest, farming areas. And so there was an immediate clash. And so there's people living all through those areas. And although if there were some thylacines out there, you might get the odd straggler wandering through, I think the chances are so low, just so low, of finding something in those places. You've got to go to the second-rate places. I don't think you have to go into a terribly remote area. You've just got to find somewhere where there aren't a lot of people who may have just be there all the time, and therefore have done a kind of an opportunistic survey. If the animals were living there, they'd be seen. As simple as that.
What do you think about the recent news with scientists being able to clone the thylacine? Do Do you think it would be a true representation of the icon if it actually happened?
Well, there's two issues here. One is the cloning, which is repeating something you've reconstructed, getting what genes you have of the thylacine, and there's some gaps because there's not well-preserved material, and adding gaps from the nearest relatives in. There's a little dunnart, which is a little animal like this, and a wombat, a numbat that's a little bit bigger. They're closely related genetically, so you can add someone sure what might be produced. And I think essentially if it's not 100% thylacine, it's not a thylacine and it's just a freak show. And while all this is going on, we've got animals becoming extinct all over the place. We can't manage the endangered species we've got. That's where I think the effort should be going. So lots of people will say, oh, well, we don't have to worry, we'll fix it up next year or the year after. Let's just go and have fun and trash the place. Animals are going extinct as we're sitting here talking.
Do you think the new clone thylacine will eventually live in the wild, or do you think it'll be kept up in captivity like Benjamin the thylacine in Beaumaris Zoo?
Well, you'd hope it was treated better than Benjamin. I mean, Benjamin died because they forgot to let him into his den at night on a freezing night. He just died miserably locked out. Nobody cared less. Wasn't even announced in the Mercury. It just wasn't of interest. No one cared. An appalling part of our history. I imagine these animals that are reconstructed, and whether you clone from that reconstruction, will be so incredibly valuable that they won't be going anywhere. They'll be locked up tight. This is the imprint here, and I think it's the left back foot of about a 2/3 grown thylacine. It's got all the characters of the small toes in a crescent. A dog has very large toes compared to the main pad, what we call the plantar pad. But a marsupials typically have a big plantar pad, very small toes. And the back foot of a thylacine, like the back feet of quolls, are very segmented.
At the moment, I have been looking everywhere to find one of the Batty family relatives, and in a few days' time I will be travelling to Morbana to visit the location of where Wilfred Batty shot the thylacine in 1930. But today, I'm going to show you one of my recent discoveries. They were driving along the main highway into Launceston from Cradle in the darkness of night, as an animal ran across the road in front of them and then stopped and turned back, which gave them both a good side-on view of the animal. A strongly striped pattern was observed by both the passenger and the driver. They estimated it was a distance of 20 to 30 metres from the car. The conversation was quite rushed, as one of them was about to travel on a plane. One of the people who were in the vehicle actually said the following statement: "The animal I saw was in the process of crossing the road as we came around the corner. It was then standing in the middle of the road as it saw us and turned around, heading back to the left-hand side of the road and off into the bushes." What I found most interesting about this sighting is that it is only one out of thousands that I discovered. And they're not just found online, they're also available in books, newspapers, magazines, and many, many other sources. People are so interested and dedicated in reporting their sightings that there are entire websites made for this purpose.
As a kid, I used to live in a little place behind Sheffield called Beulah. And my dad, we went back then, he leased his farm for about 8 years. Now we had no toilet inside, no power or water. Mum used to carry the water to this place, and believe it or not, Isaac, even though it was so hard, we were probably happier then than what we are ever since, but we had nothing, but we were really happy. We used to ask our father, now this always seemed to happen on the evening time, just on dark. We said, "Dad, what's that noise?" Now I've told several people about this, and they used to laugh at us. What it was, Dad called them hyenas hunting. Now I can still remember, it was over 60 years ago that I could still remember it. I don't know how accurate, but they used to make a sound, yip, yip, yip. And Dad called them hyenas, and he said it was most definitely a Tasmanian tiger. The reason they called them hyenas, because when the soldiers went to Africa, they used to run into the real hyenas. And they come back here and they said they smelt like nearly exactly the same. And that's why they called them hyenas. Dad said, don't worry about it, kids, it's only hyenas hunting. There was a man back there by the name of Rex Sharman. Now, he's lived there back there all his life in the bush. He's seen one crossing that road approximately 40 years ago. And I run into Rex's brother. His name was Baden. He was a very, very good cricketer. I said, Baden, did he really see it? And he confirmed, he said, he most certainly seen it. He said, but to top it off, Robert, they were fishing. They cleaned all the fish on the beach, left all the fish heads and that there. They went back the next night and they said there was a Tasmanian tiger there feeding on them. They said it was old, but it was definitely a Tasmanian tiger. Now, to confirm what I heard and seen, or not seen, heard, I went with a friend of mine down onto a big property. There was 1,900 acres come up for sale. They was talking there for about 2 hours about how they're going to do it. But you know what? At the end of that 2-hour conversation, there was the man that come down there to buy that land. I did not know him from a bar of soap. I didn't know who he was, where he was from. He didn't know me. And at the end of the conversation, he said, I'm going to tell you something now, fellas. You might not believe this, but it's true. I seen a Tasmanian tiger skin scun out in 1985. He said I was 11 years old. I was sworn to secrecy because my grandfather thought he might have got into trouble. He caught it by accident. Now, I nearly fell over when I said, because I asked him, I said, well, where? It was 1985. I said, where did you catch that? I nearly fell over. He said, in Beulah. I said, whereabouts in Beulah? It was on the property where we lived. The way he spoke about it, I can nearly say it's 100% true he did, or his grandfather did. And he was sworn to secrecy when he was 11 years old. Now, to confirm another little story, at being a builder, I did a job for a lady, and it was her grandfather that caught the last one that was in the Hobart Zoo. They caught it down at Morbana. She did say, I'm pretty sure this is right what she said, it was injured when they caught it. But they took it down there, and that died in 1936. Someone, somewhere, now that there's mobile phones around, everyone's got them in their pocket, they're going to end up taking a photo of one. I still think they're around.
The tiger was heading towards the chook shed, which was food for the family, but we live in a different age with different values now, and everybody years ago had a gun.
Do you have any recollections of your uncle talking about the Thylacine and what he did?
No, Uncle Wilfred never talked about it to us, but Dad did.
Okay.
And Dad was saying that what happened, it was walking across the yard while I was having their dinner just after 12 o'clock, middle of the day. Auntie Hilda saw it first. Once he headed towards the chook house, Uncle Wilfred ran for the gun, Dad ran for the cartridges, and they went out and shot him,
My name's Buck Benson and I'm 73 years old. I come from Smithton in Tasmania and we moved to Morbana in 1958. I met Grenville Batty and his father and his uncle during that time, and I worked with Grenville on his uncle's farm carting hay, so that's how come I got to know the Batty family, and Grenville's been my best friend ever since. My own experiences, I was working at Morbana. I'm a painter, as you can see, I'm in my overalls. But I was working at Morbana, painting a cow shed. And we decided we had another one to do at Tawada, which is across the hills quite a few miles, and there's a back road leading to Toowoomba through the bush. So we travelled through the bush and we come up over a rise, and I see an animal in the middle of the road, down a bit of a gully, down a hill, and I had two people with me, and I said, I stopped the car and I said, "What's that down there?" And one of my gentlemen with me was reading a newspaper. He looked up, he said, "It's a Tasmanian tiger." I said, "Thanks very much," and I said, "That's exactly how I seen it." The other bloke confirmed this as well. The tiger was eating a wallaby on the side of the road, a dead wallaby, and he reared up, stood up on his hind legs and turned around like this to face us, and he was a dead set ringer as a Tasmanian tiger. You could see his strips, and he just got up and walked off. This would be 20 years ago I seen that. When they smell a human coming or anything funny, they're out of the way and you can't see them. But I do believe myself that there's still a few left in the bush.
The old barns used to have a ladder up towards a chaff cutter and doors out the top.
Yeah.
And he said if those doors were open, he said the tiger was gone. He said they'd climb up the ladders. He said dog couldn't.
Why do you think your uncle never talked about the Thylacine or his encounter?
Probably I think the government was frowning on people shooting them. You know, they didn't want them to shoot them. To him it wasn't a big deal. I was surprised that he even gave those interviews.
Wilfred Batty was a good old bloke, yeah, and he could tell a lot of stories, and he certainly recite the story about the Tasmanian tiger, which he was very good at, but what he done was true, and was very interested to listen to him. He's a good old bushman, dairy farmer, and he knew a lot about the tiger and the Mulbanner area.
I got a lot of memories. One probably not so good because I had to stay with him when I was young, and because I flew down and jumped on his tractor, and when he went to start it, the battery was flat, so I got me bottom smacked for that, and it was the first time I'd ever had me bottom smacked. Later in life he went to work at one of the milk factories when he sold out.
My friend, Mr. Littlejohn, told me about this, involved in the vermin control out that way on Pistol Plains. And one night he was out there going around collecting wallaby or disposing of wallaby, and he got a call from the forestry department, "Cease your work immediately. There's been a lair sighted not far from where you were shooting, and we don't want any disturbance there." But this was kept secret, and still secret to this day.
My view is that probably the most likely place where they'd be, and is down the west coast. My belief is that they'd be feeding off the seagulls, because seagulls would be easy to catch for them. There was a tiger in the zoo in London, and they did an autopsy on him when he died, and he'd been eating pigeons that were coming into his cage. No, I think that it was definitely out there until the 1970s. Yeah. There's too many credible sightings. Moorbanner wasn't known as a tiger habitat. Toowoomba, Treelena, back at Wynyard, and a lot of other places, but the tiger that Uncle Wilfred shot was the only one that had been seen in Moorbanner. Dad said it was his gun actually that shot that Uncle Wilfred used, but the gun that Dad gave me is not that gun, because Dad gave me what was a Harrington Richardson, and if you look at the photos of Uncle Wilfred, the barrel was a lot longer than so where that gun got to, I don't know. Yeah, I didn't have a lot to do with Uncle. Well, he lived probably 10 mile away, up to 10 mile away from us. You didn't see a lot of him, except that time when I had to go and live with him when Mum was sick. And as I said, he didn't really talk about it. Moorbanner's an interesting district. It's about nearly 30 k's long, and about one to two farms wide in places. So everybody knew one another, but they still lived fairly well apart from one another. It's probably the longest district in Tasmania, actually. Well, this is the road going up to the house, and the house which was burnt down is about halfway between that road and that house.
Yep.
So where the tiger was shot, I would say it's probably towards the back of the house. We'd only be probably 50 or 60 metres from where the tiger was shot. My father did talk about it. He said that the tiger was walking across the yard of the house, and Auntie Hilda spotted it, and the tiger did a loop around back towards the fowl house where the chooks were, and that's when panic started to set in because they needed the eggs for their food, you see. The tiger had been around the district for a while, and just over there was a young family, and the tiger was actually following the children to school, and also he used to have the children get the cows in. Well, they refused to get the cows in because they weren't happy about a tiger following them. My father was saying with the tiger, normally they did a big loop. They didn't turn sharp, but if they were cornered they would. Also, didn't seem to be a very aggressive animal at all. No one had seen a tiger in Moorbanner before this one was spotted. My thoughts on being shot, I mean, they were worried about their food source. Different lifestyle to what we have today, and a lot of people are a lot more conscious of endangered animals. The road stops there.
Yep.
So I would say the house was round about this area.
Okay.
And I believe the tiger would have been shot around the back of the house, in the yard. I've had a look, and there's a few stones that normally not in this area, and they were probably used for foundations. But all this ground has been worked up since, so to say that I actually know where the house was, but I know from what Dad told me, it was about halfway between that road and that house, which is about where we're standing now. There's a lot of unexplored bush in Tasmania where they would have lived. Some of the local people thought might have happened is they may have got distemper, which was a dog's disease, and that may have killed them out. But that's only speculation. Yeah. It was first settled very early because there's deposits of pipe clay, and the convicts used to make bricks along at Brickmakers Beach. If it was a westerly, they could come in on low tide and go out on a high tide, but if it was easterly, they'd have to row the bricks out in rowboats to the boats. But there was a lot of bricks made by convicts up in Moorbanner to start with. There was probably sawmills nearly every couple of kilometres. In the 1930s, when Uncle Wilfred and Dad were working on the road, it was depression years, and the government put contracts out for country roads so people could create employment for people. And they made the mistake of paying those contractors £5 extra for every corner. This is the farm where my father bought in 1940, and we lived here up until about 2000, so we owned this farm for about 60 years. In this back country, it was fairly tough to make a living, and that's one of the reasons why that the chooks were so valuable for a food source.
So this road just here was actually named after your family. We can see the sign saying Batty's Road.
And that was only named about 30 years ago, because before that it was the main road into Moorbanner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the 21st of April 1904, Wilfred Batty was born in Bradford, Yorkshire, England, and he later moved to Tasmania, where he shot a thylacine on the 6th of May 1930. Sadly, the thylacine he shot was considered as the last one to ever live in the wild. Some people look down on what Wilfred did, or have labelled him as one of the causes to the thylacine's extinction. Others simply believe he was doing what the majority of farmers would have done back then to protect their livestock from wild animals. But whatever your opinion is, Wilfred Batty passed away on the 7th of October 1989. Regardless of what the world's thoughts are, today I'm here to remember Wilfred.